I can start.
Yeah.
So, buenos dias. Great to see you here again. And I'm very happy you answered yesterday my questionnaire. And you might be wondering where are the questions coming from. So I will tell you what is the origin of the questionnaire. My main focus is project-based learning. And the questionnaires were coming from the theory related to the coherent science education or coherent STEM education. And project-based learning is one way how to organize coherent science education. So first, a couple of words about the questionnaire. We have had an European Union funded project where Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany have been participating. And our agenda has been to make a definition, clear definition to the coherent science education. This is an area that has been researched quite a lot, but there are different views what is the meaning of the coherent science education. One paper we published some maybe 3 years ago in the Journal of Science Teacher Education. And our idea has been also to build a coherent science teacher education in order to support the coherent science education. So what is the meaning of coherent, you might wonder now. So I will tell you. And this is not my personal opinion, it's very much summarized in the project where many scholars have been participating. And it's very much based on the previous research. And now we are continuing the project. We are now collecting data from our science student teachers, physics, chemistry, biology, math, and in order to develop a deep holistic understanding what is coherence in science education and science teacher education. There are 4 kind of issues that are characterizing the coherence in education, in science education. So the phenomena is number 1. So the learning is situated with observation, exploration in a phenomena, and which is relevant for students' life. So I'm sure that in all those topics we are having in lower secondary, upper secondary, we can connect them to the student's life. Second, we are looking for core ideas. So we are not aiming to teach a very big number of separate facts and concepts. We have to find what are the core ideas. And what are the core ideas? I will introduce later what they are, but very shortly, they are powerful. You can use them in problem solving. They are generative. You can plan investigations. They are covering many fields in STEM area, like conservation of energy is the core idea. Energy is a concept, but the idea that energy is something that is conserving in the phenomenon. And third one is the need to know. So every time we are teaching something to students, we should establish a situation where students have a feeling that I really need to know more about that issue. And there are different kind of ways how to support students to develop that kind of attitude that I need to know that. And so we can support interest, for example. And then knowledge in use. So the use of knowledge is important, not remembering different kind of things, but you should be able to use knowledge in different situations. So these 4 issues together, they are characterizing the coherent science education. And the questionnaire, in the questionnaire I had questions that are in the very core of this idea. but there were also ideas that are far away. So there were some very negatively oriented questions among those questions. So I was willing to know what is your orientation to science education. So how much you are looking for coherence, or how much you are looking for big number of issues and broad kind of factual type of knowledge. So that was my aim with the questionnaire. And now I will tell shortly what was coming out in order to share kind of common understanding in the beginning. So thank you for all who were answering the questionnaire. There were some 15 questions, and the scale was from 1 to 5. So 3 is in the middle of the scale. If the average is over 3, then it might be important. If it's less than 3, it's not so important. And the average of the all answers was 3.3. And now you can see that in all those areas, core ideas first, in all those areas there are ideas that are very much emphasizing the coherent science instruction, but there are also ideas that are not so much, quite opposite. And you vote that allow students to learn as many science topics as possible is important in planning the science instruction. Yes, in somehow it is important to have a broad literature, but in the context of coherent science education, we have to focus to the most important core ideas. We have to reduce the number of topics in our lessons in order to have more space for using the knowledge, using the core ideas to make inquiry type of activities, problem-solving type of activities. So that is the fact. It's not possible to teach all what has been aimed to teach. And it makes science so borrowing that you are giving fact and fact and fact and fact. So that was maybe the area that you were not so much orienting to the coherent. On the other hand, support students in building the understanding of a few science topics over time. That is the second important, and this is very much focusing to the coherent. And focus to a small set of science topics. So you had both. You are willing to teach a lot, but you are also willing to teach to the most important. So think about that. Actually, when I'm asking the questions from my students or my colleagues, it looks quite similar. It's not a different. And in the beginning, I have to be honest, when we start the project, I was having quite similar ideas, so nothing so new in your thinking. And then need to know, here you were very strongly looking for that. The motivate students interest using real world and introduce new science topics when they help to make sense of the phenomena. They are the highest, and they are very much in line with the coherent science instruction. But also the negative you give quite high, they could be lower. And then the knowledge in use, so use of knowledge in new situations. And here the highest are very clear. They are according to the coherent. Give students the opportunity to explain science phenomena and give students the opportunity to model science phenomena. So they are the highest. And for example, focus on memorizing, you give very low. That's good. And finally, the phenomena, the highest organized around real-world problems and phenomena, you are emphasizing that. And also the focus on observation and problems that are relevant for students' life and guided by questions students could ask. So you raise those coherent characteristics high. So all in all, based on your answers, I can interpret that especially in the phenomena is the starting point, you are emphasizing that. and this need to know is important. The students have to develop interest, and use of knowledge is important. Only here in the the core ideas, it was not so clear. Should we teach very many or just to the core, what is the important? You like to ask question or make a comments, because then I will orient to the project-based learning, which is very much according to this coherent science instruction. Comments or questions, please.
Hello, I wanted to know how you choose the core ideas, and if the need to know is comes after you choose the core ideas, or is it integrated into the selection of the core ideas?
That's very relevant and important question. So somehow they are somehow together, but of course the phenomena, and you are thinking about the phenomena, and you are thinking about need to know. Maybe they are first, and then knowledge in use and the core ideas. So what are the core ideas? That's an important question. I already mentioned that it is a little bit different than concept. Energy is the concept, but the core idea includes the idea that it tells something about the concept, the conservation of energy. And forces are created in interactions. And when two bodies are interacting, there is equal force and act at the same time. I have later on example of chemistry, for example, that materials have properties and you can recognize the materials based on the properties. That is one core idea in chemistry. And you can use structure models to describe the structure of the material, and the model also explain the behavior. So sometimes they are even two sentences, but some core idea that is very relevant in problem solving and in planning new investigations. They are generative, but we will come back about that. That's a challenging question, and teachers we have been working, they are typically asking the same question. These core ideas, in our curriculum we do not say it in a similar way. We are somehow telling that you have to focus to the most important physics, chemistry, biology concepts, but it is not the same. In the United States they are using the core ideas. The next generation science standard emphasizes that the core ideas are important, and they have a lot of examples of the core ideas. In this coherent science instruction, the people who have been researching a long time that area, they have raised the core idea as an idea. Any more comments or questions? So let's look for the project-based learning. So the main idea is to make sense of the phenomena or design solutions, because we are now focusing on STEM. So also designing solutions, that could be done according to the project-based learning. And in tomorrow presentation, I'm more focusing to the engineering type of activities and designing type of activities. Now I'm focusing to the inquiry type of activities. This project-based learning has been an important research area for our group. We have published, let me say, 25, 30 publications in the most high-quality science education journals. We have been looking for learning, how the students learn science, physics, chemistry, in the context of project-based learning. But we especially have been looking how students engage in learning, what is supporting for students' engagement, motivation. And I will tell you something today about what especially in project-based learning interest students in learning. And we have been doing this research together with the US researchers, so Kratzig and Barbara Snyder. This is because they get the funding, quite nice funding from the United States Science Foundation and Finnish Science Foundation. There was a special call that if you are making a good enough proposal from United States and Finland, then you are getting financing. So we get 1 million euro and they get 20 million euro, so 20 times more. The US is a big country, they have more money. But 1 million for making a research project is a huge money in Finnish scale. And we have been very happy to collaborate and make that research. So many papers, just examples. And also the COVID time research. In the COVID time, Finland closed the schools for a period, and teachers were teaching physics and chemistry, biology through the Zoom and other distance teaching learning devices. Google Classroom was used. We were also looking for project-based learning in this kind of remote teaching situation. And the student engagement go down dramatically in the COVID time. They feel loneliness and that kind of feelings. But it's important to know also how the project-based learning is working in remote situations. This is not a new idea. First time, maybe it was John Dewey who was introducing the project-based learning. And the idea was that something similar that is done in the working real life is done at school. So students are active in setting the aims or objectives. They are doing together things. They are creating something concrete, a project output. So the Dewey's idea was something that they are, you know the slogan, learning by doing. But the project-based learning was something he was introducing in more than 100 years ago. There are many papers who summarize, and there are also papers who are very much blaming the project-based learning. It is so loose concept. People mean with the project-based learning many things, and there is no common understanding. And sometimes schools call whatever there is happening as a project, but that is not a project-based learning. So I will now introduce what we mean in our context, what is project-based learning. And it is whatever. It's very much focusing to the physics and chemistry aims in the curricula. It's aiming to teach physics and chemistry. And that is the core in this project-based learning I am now introducing. The inquiry-based science education, there was one idea that students are somehow following the similar practices than scientists are doing, asking questions, planning, and that kind of things. It was somehow epistemologically created pedagogical approach. But project-based learning, it's very much based on the learning science research. What is known about human learning? Of course, there are ideas coming from the epistemology, what the scientists are doing, so something should be done at school. It is not the same as inquiry or discovery learning. And there are two nice books, How People Learn number 2. The books are summarizing what kind of activities are supportive for learning. And later we become familiar with the learning through reading and writing. And the same ideas, the message from those books are somehow embodied, somehow hidden in the activities you will learn today related to the learning through reading and writing. So the book summarizes what is known about learning, what kind of activities are supportive for learning. There are many other things, but this is one outcome. So when students are active, they learn better. They plan, they actively read, write, measure, and assess they are active. They are in collaboration. They are in interaction. The learning is somehow contextualized in real-life situations. And what else? Students are active in knowledge construction. That kind of characteristics are emphasized in those books as supportive for learning. And you remember yesterday we made a definition what we mean learning in this context. And then in more detail, there is also a lot of research about how project-based learning, with this connotation I am now introducing, how it is supportive for learning. And so Kratzik is one of those who is very active, Blumenfeld, Fishman, and many other merit. So they emphasize that students cannot learn scientific knowledge without scientific knowledge practices, and vice versa. Without focusing to the knowledge, you are not learning the practices. In process approach, there was an idea that you can separate them. You can learn the practices and then you can do whatever, but that was not true. So they emphasize that they are both at the same time. Knowledge practices means what the scientists are doing, planning, questioning, collecting data, using evidence while they are arguing. And then I have a picture, so I try to summarize what is the core in project-based learning based on the learning science research. So our aim when we are organizing project-based learning is to engage students in learning of knowledge and practices. We are changing the traditional teaching to emphasizing knowledge and practices at the same time. And nowadays the digital tools are very much used with this type of learning. So the first characteristics, the students' ideas in the center. They are active in building new knowledge. They are following the practices similar that scientists are doing. We call them knowledge practices. Social interaction is key. And they are constructing something. In a project, everyday life project, there is a project outcome. But also in the project-based learning, there should be something that is coming out. It could be a story, it could be a model, equation. So it depends on the student age and what is the aim. Something concrete come out. But it could be just a picture about the model which is describing the phenomenon. That is also the outcome. And then contextualizing is important. And here we use the driving question. It is somehow driving the students' learning for a longer time, so several lessons. So the project-based learning is not typically organized during one lesson. We need several lessons. It's a kind of, for example, the movement in the high school level. There are movement with the constant velocity and movement with the acceleration. You need many hours. But the driving question is driving the learning of different type of movements and the models which are describing the movements. And then the scaffolding. The teacher's role in organizing the learning, in supporting groups in learning, that's important. So that is in a nutshell how the outcomes of the learning science research, both of them are emphasized in project-based learning. You might be a little bit frustrated because I'm not telling what is project-based learning. So, but it is not possible to tell. It is possible to describe. There are these kind of characteristics when students are learning according to the project-based learning. It is not jack like that. No, they are doing, and it comes more clear when I go further. I have some video clips from the lessons and explanations more. Kratzik and Sinn and Blumenfeld, his colleagues, this kind of very concentrated descriptions can be found. So this is in a nutshell what is project-based learning. Of course, the previous picture is telling a lot. But the driving question is contextualizing. The focus is in curriculum aims, so really science or STEM aims. Students learn or participate in authentic situated inquiry in order to make sense of the phenomena in line with the driving question. So the driving question, why it is useful to use the helmet while you are bicycling. So a lot of things should be clarified in order to answer why the objects are sometimes falling down at the same time, sometimes it takes a longer time. So it's a complex phenomenon. There are forces and different movements, and it takes time to answer to that question. What is good to my health in my diet? So something like that. They are driving the longer period learning. So students are active in practices, and now we are discussing about scientific and engineering practices in STEM education. The core ideas are important, the collaboration, knowledge construction, and artifacts. And teacher is scaffolding, and formative assessment is used. Teacher is asking what you have done until now, what you are planning to do next. He or she is supporting students' learning process. What is your evidence? Can you show me in your notes where is the evidence? And what you are claiming now? So this kind of questions is guiding the students' learning processes. Phenomena. I think I have already told about phenomena, but you will have these slides in the folder. Is that true? Yeah. So you can come back and if you are willing to translate them, it's up to you. You can use. I give a permission. You can use them if you are willing to use them. I'm very happy if they are useful. So this is driving question for 7th grade. Our students are then about 13, 14 years old, and we are teaching light. So what do you need in order to see light, ray, or an object? This is somehow guiding learning for a while, and then comes lenses and mirrors and different other things. But this is the most challenging for teachers and for me to develop a driving question is really driving the learning activities. Unfortunately, it is very challenging. But you benefit if you have a driving question. It is driving students' learning. It is contextualizing learning. Here are examples. Which of them are driving questions? So, are you able to, I can read them. So, what is gravity? Why I need to wear a bicycle helmet? What food are good for me? How high is the school building? Why it is colder in the winter and warmer in the summer? What is the definition of the velocity? Why objects comes down sometimes at the same time, sometimes different time? What is matter? How the measurement of the influence acceleration? So, can you evaluate them? What your opinion? Now you have a kind of preliminary understanding what is a driving question. What can you give an example of them? What is a good driving question now in your mind? What might be the good? Which is driving for a couple of lessons, students' learning activities. And we are putting things together, and this is an answer to the question that is driving. Yeah, would you like to answer? And maybe give some comments.
Thank you. I think that there are several good driving questions. And for my eyes, it is why is colder in the winter and warmer in summer. why objects come down sometimes at the same time and sometimes at a different time. And a tricky one is how the mass of an object influences to its acceleration. I
It's
think
quite detailed, so it's difficult to say. Is it a good or not? It's not very good, but might be. Yeah, I agree.
the last one,
Yeah, please.
well, it's tricky because it does not.
Which one?
The acceleration is
Yeah.
independent of the mass.
You're right. It's totally wrong.
It's a provocative question.
Yeah, very good. I'm not sure if it is my mistake or is it a provocative. Thank you for raising this.
It's okay.
Great.
There are others that are not driving questions.
Yeah, you are right. That's great, clear. So we already discussed about core ideas. Now, in a nutshell, what are core ideas? So they are significant across science domains and engineering domains. In STEM education, they are important. They are explanatory, could be used for explaining phenomena. They are generative, tool for understanding, investigation, solving problems. They are relevant for personal, local, global context. You can teach them, and students can learn them. So these kind of characteristics could be found from the literature. What is the core idea? And this I think I already mentioned that these are my examples from the chemistry. I try to balance physics and chemistry. Biology is not my field. I give some bad examples from biology. All substances have physical and chemical properties. That's the idea. A chemical reaction is a process in which substances interact with each other. And that kind of things are core ideas. The practices I already told many times, but this is now the list of the practices. And in our curriculum, there is almost a similar list as here. This is actually coming from the next generation science standards from the United States. So the asking questions or making the definition to the problem, planning and carrying out investigation, analyzing and interpreting data, developing and using models, using math and computational thinking, developing explanation and designing solutions, engaging in argument from evidence, obtain, evaluation, communicate information. And in a lesson, it's not necessary that you are going just top down. It depends on the situation, what students are doing. Sometimes, for example, in a climate education issues, maybe you start with the data, you analyze the data, and your questions are coming to your mind when you are looking for the data. It is not necessary that the question is coming first. In modern physics, modern chemistry, it's quite often that there is a data you are working with, and then comes the questions to your mind. But in school physics, school chemistry, it's quite often we are asking and then we are looking for the phenomenon. By collaboration, nothing to add for yesterday. So students, we need collaboration in order to share ideas and learn from each other. Teacher scaffolding, I already introduced that. The teacher is asking questions, not giving answers. What do you claim? What is your evidence? So now, that was the definition for project-based learning. Not so simple, not so clear, but anyway definition. Implicit definition. But let's have a look how Finnish teachers have guided their students to project-based learning in upper secondary, high school level. So we plan together with teachers a module of some 3-4 weeks. We have a physics and chemistry. It's about every day or every second day, and the lesson is about 90 minutes. So it's quite much, altogether some 20 hours, 45 minutes hours. And these were the kind of objectives. After the module, our aim was that students are able to analyze data on the motion and recognize when the object moves with constant or changing velocity. This first mechanics in upper secondary. Analyze the relation among the net force on a macroscopic object. I hope it's right now. Apply scientific and engineering practices for design, evaluate and refine an experimental design. So they were the aims or objectives. And as you can see, the content and the practices are not separate, they are together. Students are able to use the knowledge in a different way. So you are not, even in the setting of aims, you are not separating the knowledge or core ideas and practices. So, models for motion, Newton's second law, scientific practices. So now you can see some examples from the classroom. This is a long period, and I have made short video clips. And let's have a look. So, unfortunately, the language is in Finnish, but you can see what's happening when teacher is guiding students to project-based learning. So, let's hope it started.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday takes a time. It starts. That was coming also yesterday. Somehow it is not super. So something is missing from the computer. So
no possibility.
No possibility. But you can take the slides later on. They are in the folder, and you can look the videos. I just explain shortly. So this is the starting of the mechanics, and teacher is having those coffee filters. In one hand he's having one coffee filter, and on the other hand 2 coffee filters, and he let them go down, and the heavier comes first and the lighter comes second. Then he continues. In the other hand 2 coffee filters, other hand 4. Again the heavier comes a little bit earlier and the lighter comes a little bit later. And then 4 and 8, and then they come about the same time. So it's quite a complex phenomena, and we recognize that it was cognitively engaging for students. They start thinking, but they were not at all able to explain the phenomenon. It was quite simple, on the other hand, and on the other hand, very complex to explain. We wrote a book about project-based learning, and one Nobel physicist gave a comments and read the book, and he was thinking that this is really challenging and engaging phenomena for high school students. Really, what physicists should interest and maybe all others. Sorry for not able to show that. So those who are interested about physics, they of course you are thinking how the forces are acting and how the air resistance is changing when the velocity is changing. So, but this is not actually now needed. It's just for you who are thinking about this. And then the contextual teacher is continuing. He takes some video clips from the real life, not the real life, but the jumping from the airplane and using the parachute and how the movements are changing and discussing about that. And then it comes this kind of driving question that, okay, it's an interesting, the movements, they are changing, they are not changing, and what is changing the velocity, and that kind of questions comes to students and teachers' mind while they were discussing. And then the teacher was asking students to write down clear research questions. The questions that they are able to make research investigations in the context of the phenomena they are investigating. I try again if it is working. No. And students are working in a small group, writing down the questions. Teacher is walking around, asking questions. And then the teacher is asking students that, okay, let's put two groups together. And first group is first introducing the questions to other group, and then vice versa. And then discuss about the questions you have now, and let's find common questions that are somehow common to both groups. So it takes a time. So actually it takes almost 1 hour, this phase, to generate questions related to the phenomenon. And then the teacher was asking that, okay, if you are now presenting your consensus questions to the whole class, and teacher was writing them down to the learning management system, and then he asked students to classify them. Is it possible to make some order? Because there are quite many questions. What are the questions we start and what are the questions we look next? And we have done it in many lessons, many classrooms. And quite often students recognize that, okay, there are questions that are focusing to the movement. And there are questions that are focusing to the change in movement. Okay, then it is easy that let's start with this movement. And then we continue with what is making the change in movement. A lot of scaffolding is needed and consensus type of discussion. And this actually from my daughter's dissertation work. She was looking project-based learning in the first and second grade. And very similar, the students were writing down to the small blackboards what is the question and collecting data and the similar processes. So it's quite interesting. It could be used in a modified way in different levels of education. And then, of course, students are then starting to make investigations according to the research questions. They are measuring the movement. They can see easily that in some type of movements the place is changing in a similar way, or the velocity is about the same, and there are also movements where the velocity is changing. And then they summarize and they come to the models which are describing the phenomenon. And the same in first and second grade, students come to the models after the investigations. Communication is important. So it was important that they were communicating the research question. They were also communicating how they are measuring, how they are investigating, but also the outcomes. First, groups together and then kind of common understanding to the whole class. And it's very easy to use also mobile phones. It's not needed expensive tools for making research on the movement. Students can use the phone and make these graphs. There are many softwares available for mobile phone, and you can make research on the movement and analyze the data. So it's not a question about the tools. It is the question how the tools are used. Now, I have done part of my work, and I have introduced the project-based learning. I have introduced one example from the classroom. I will introduce later what was coming out, what students learned, and what was engaging, what was motivating for them. I will tell that story after your exercise. So my exercise is now for you. You can go to the 4-person group, and I ask you to think about an example, not the mechanics, but something else, in chemistry, in physics, whatever. But focus to this my sub-questions. What is the phenomena you are guiding students to make sense? What is the driving question? What are the core ideas you are aiming to teach them? And what kind of practices you guide those students to engage? So let's use some 15 minutes. We can have a break also inside, so you can discuss and have a break. So we'll continue about 3:15. And maybe there is coffee. I'm not sure if there is coffee. Juan Carlos. Glass of water, yeah. Is this exercise clear for you now? So let's discuss it, and let's give an example to each other, and I will ask you to answer these questions. Okay, let's go to the group of 4 people. Is there coffee or not?
Yes.
Okay, we can take coffee and we can chat.
We can bring here the coffee. Do you prefer or do you want to walk a bit?
Yeah, walk a bit.
Okay.
Walk a bit.
But what do we do first? Do we drink the
As you like, as you like. You have autonomy. It's too early.
Just
Just a few minutes, yeah.
few more minutes.
But very soon, we share.
claro, todo sobre la.
Sí, muy abierto.
Después termina siendo más sencillo de lo que uno imaginaba. Esta es nuestra estructura que tenemos que organizar.
¿Qué prácticas?
Claro, ¿qué prácticas? Sí.
La experimentación, el aprendizaje, la carrera,
Podría ser, por ejemplo, tirar dos vasos muy distintos y uno rápido el cuaderno porque escuchar, ¿no? Y de pronto el otro más tiempo.
Okay, can we continue now? Let's share our discussions, what was coming out. So very short, quick presentations and short discussions. I have some data I would like to share with you to give the evidence for distance learning. But who will start? Okay.
Just speak in Spanish so you'll.
Bueno, hola. El grupo trabajó acerca del concepto de la viscosidad de los líquidos. Y hablando de una clase de niños de 6-7 años, lo que hicimos fue trabajar acerca de una carrera de líquidos. Entonces teníamos, por ejemplo, la miel, agua y jabón líquido o chocolate, y los chicos tiraban a través del tobogán los líquidos al mismo tiempo. Con esa idea lo que lográbamos saber es cuán rápido se deslizaban por el trampón, por el tobogán. Sí, no tobogán. Sí, es un cañito. Ese era un caño con cartón. Y de esa manera ellos podían experimentar con los líquidos para ver quién corría más o quién se desplazaba o quién se deslizaba más por las canaletas. Y eso es lo que hicimos en 6 años. Y el fenómeno era la fluidez de los líquidos.
Okay. There's some extra voice coming out, but I get almost everything. So the phenomena, liquids and liquids together, and you are guiding students to make sense of that. But what was the driving question? What is driving the students?
Who is winning the race? Who wins the race among the liquids? Who will win the race among the different liquids?
Oh, yeah. So the liquids are fighting each other. Yeah, I see. And what is the new knowledge? What is the core idea you learn while you are making investigation on that phenomenon? What is the core idea coming out?
La viscosidad de los líquidos trabajaron.
So viscosity.
La viscosidad.
Okay. And it is a concept, but core idea is somehow describing a little bit more. So the liquids have different viscosity and they behave according to that. Something like it's a property of the liquid and explains something, and I'm not able to put these together, but it's more than viscosity. It's a kind of idea that is describing the phenomenon. That was very clear. Thank you. And the other group. Who's willing to share what was coming out in your discussion? You have to come here, one of you. You have to come here.
Nosotros pensamos en el fenómeno de la deforestación. Pensamos en un ejemplo concreto. Por ejemplo, ahora hace poco, las cataratas de Iguazú rebalsaron del lado argentino, y entonces hay información concreta sobre eso, que está en los diarios, que ha salido con datos. Bien, entonces nosotros queríamos trabajar el fenómeno de deforestación y pensamos en algunas preguntas, por ejemplo, ¿qué efectos genera la tala de árboles? Si hay alguna relación, o qué relación hay entre la deforestación y las inundaciones. La deforestación altera la absorción del suelo. Pensamos como preguntas. Y de ahí empezamos a tratar de identificar qué contenidos estaríamos o temáticas estaríamos trabajando con los estudiantes. Y, por ejemplo, pensamos, bueno, tanto en las características del suelo, la función o la importancia que tienen los terrenos forestales, las consecuencias de la deforestación, que son temáticas, digamos, complejas que abren a distintos fenómenos desde la biología, lo meteorológico, la física, etc. Y como prácticas científicas implicadas, pensábamos que se pone en juego la observación, el establecimiento de relaciones, la construcción de relaciones, la búsqueda de información, el análisis de datos, la construcción de ideas.
So, in my understanding, almost everything was coming out very clearly. It was from the biology, related to the environmental type of issues also. I'm not willing to add anything. It was quite clear for me. Thank you. But what I would like to say in general, so you get a feeling to focus to the most important issues in when teacher is planning the project-based learning. And I think that you recognize it's quite challenging. It is challenging in Finland. It takes a time for teachers. They have to, for example, these mechanics I introduced, we have done it together with the same teachers maybe 3-4 times during the 4-year of period. And the teachers feel that during the second and third year, they start to understand what they are doing. So unfortunately, this looks quite simple, but to go in deep and also to help students to engage in those activities, it takes time. So good pedagogical approach, but quite challenging for teachers. And maybe it's about how teachers trust their students, that they are actually quite good in doing things. How to scaffold, how to avoid give recipes and ready answers. But in my opinion, you succeeded very well. If I compare my experiences in my country, it takes a long time. So thank you for good examples. And now, finally, I would like to share some data we have been collecting in Finland from the project-based learning. So, I give you some examples of the papers we have written, and now I have picked up some data, some results, not everything. So this data, what I am introducing first, it is coming from the kind of quasi-experimental design, so that 3 classrooms were following the project-based learning, and in each classroom there were about 20 students, a little bit more. And the control group 2 classrooms were following the more traditional type of teaching. However, also in the traditional class, they have experiments. They were making measurements, looking for the different movements and that kind of things. But it was not project-based learning. It was more traditional practical activities according to the textbook or lab manual. And we were very much focusing in this study to the engagement. So how eager students were to study the topic, but also the learning outcomes, what was coming out when students were learning the Newtonian mechanics, in traditional way and in project-based learning way. The engagement, there are, in general, the engagement, what it means, it is the phenomena that occur with the student and an environment, and the level of engagement, it varies. So sometimes you are really engaged what you are doing, and after 5 seconds you are not anymore. So it varies, it's not stable. And that's why we have been measuring the student engagement in random situations. Students are getting the beep to their phone, and then we are asking a couple of questions. And based on the answers, we can analyze, are they engaged in learning, motivated to learn or not. And in the general theory of engagement, there are typical three preconditions for engagement. The first are coming from the flow theory. The first is the interest. It is coming from the interest theory, person-object interest theory. So how interesting is the topic you are working with? It could be also the activity. How interesting is the activity? And then the other two are coming from the flow theory. Csikszentmihalyi have developed the flow theory. If your skill is high enough compared to challenge, then you go deep learning. You are totally engaged in learning. But this challenge and skill should be in balance. Everybody, we are science people. We remember in our own school time when we are calculating exercises, and we are not solving it, we are almost solving it, and how engaging it is. So that is the engagement. Interest, what you are doing, it is interesting, you have enough skill compared to challenge, but there must be a challenge. The challenge is a positive issue. Our upper secondary curriculum is very much emphasizing that there should be enough challenge for students, because that engages students. Not too high. If the challenge is too high, then they frustrate and they get a burnout. So it's a very, very challenging for teacher to balance those two things. And in more general, in the engagement theories, these emotional engagement, cognitive engagement, yeah, behavioral engagement. And this balance between skill and challenge is more cognitive, and interest is more emotional. And in science lessons, students are doing with hands, it's about behavior. So they all are present. And we have been asking with the phones, so the students get in random situation, couple of questions, what you are doing, okay, making conclusion or planning, and then how interesting it is what you are doing, how challenging it is in a positive way, and what is your skill related to the challenge. And then we know these three issues. If all those three are high, then it's very clear that student is fully engaged in learning. And this is...
There is a question.
Yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah, please.
but it is related with all what you're saying, and in your earlier scheme, the issue of the need to know. I have taught a little bit, and I'm teaching a little bit in a high school. And unfortunately, I must say that the majority of our students, the ones that I know, do not have any need to know. They show, not only with me, but with others, they show, no, it's a private school, though. And it's supposed that if it's a private school, the families have some certain amount of money and some commodity, well, it seems as they do not need to know, and it's very frustrating. I wanted to say that earlier, but I choose to say it now.
thank you. It's important to say that aloud. So that is practice in situation. And now we are looking for solutions. How to make science more engaging. How to develop the need to know. And I try to give some answers. However, there are still students in Finland who are, it doesn't mean anything to learn science for them, unfortunately. But there is some light. If you are able to balance this skill and challenge somehow, and interest is very complex. I have this one picture in the very beginning, that there is, of course, there is a personal interest. Those who are really interested about science, we do not need to take care of them. The big majority is those who are not interested. And then we are aiming to make this situational interest through content, through selecting the activity, through knowledge. They have to have enough knowledge before they come to the class, or we have to help them, and then there should be knowledge available. Also the activity, how much they feel autonomy, how much they feel relatedness, they need each other, and how much they feel competence, that influence. And this project-based learning, if you are able to start that kind of activity in the classroom, there is inside certain characteristics that are supportive for engagement. So there is no simple answer. You have to try second time. We wrote a paper about this engagement inside the project-based learning. Yeah.
Could I comment something, because I think this is quite important. Probably this question of complementing what Jari has said, I believe that also there is a wider problem that has to do with the value of education and schooling in our society, in general terms, that unfortunately we are in such a situation where there is no value. Society is not valuing almost at all the educational process, the schooling process. And that might be playing a strong role in when you go into the group and the individuals, the students, you know, in terms of why they are not, they do not find any real need why to study, why to get a certification, a graduation, why to reach the secondary level degree. They have to reach it. It's compulsory. They have to go through schooling, but there is no certain interest for the whole schooling. So then it's very difficult, particularly in the case of science, to get them engaged and to see. I think that this very general context, and particularly I insist in our country, that this has declined considerably, might be playing or might answer your question about this lack of need of learning. Sorry, but I...
Yeah, of course this context and environment influence, and that's why the science teacher should also be kind of career guidance person, introduce the different possibilities outside the school and different career possibilities. But I think that if I look at the PISA data, there is a question for students who are answering the PISA questions, that what do you think when you are 30 years old, are you probably working in the field of science? And in broad way, including engineering, health, medical doctors, all those. And in Finland it's about 17% think that they are working in science. And it is very small. In the Netherlands, Germany, it is a little bit smaller. But we are really in trouble. If I remember in Chile, which is participating in the PISA, it was 50% of young people who were thinking that they are working in science, medical field or engineering field or real science field. That's why it's important to open students' eyes with the possibilities in science, and the study visits are important, interview with the kind of role models and taking the role models to the classroom. So
Absolutely.
they are maybe...
Just there is one question here. Sí. Porque entonces se queda grabado.
Yo, en relación al comentario del colega, pensaba que es todo un desafío, y lo que están planteando, todo un desafío didáctico y curricular, porque por un lado tiene que ver con los contenidos, digamos, que tenemos que incluir en los diseños curriculares, ¿cierto? Que son, digamos, comunes, obligatorios para todos, y acá, o sea, frente a este dilema o esta situación de que quizá cuando hablamos de interés hay un porcentaje chico de estudiantes que se interesan por ciertas temáticas, pero bueno, puede ser una decisión, digamos, de la sociedad que esos contenidos se tengan que incluir. Entonces ahí hay un primer desafío, dilema, cuestión. Y en relación a la enseñanza, una vez que, bueno, se dicen, ok, estos son los temas que todas y todos tienen que aprender, me parece que, sobre todo con los jóvenes, quizás también es todo un desafío y no siempre es fácil, más con las ciencias, pero quizás siempre en este sentido de proyectos tratar de buscar otras temáticas que sirvan como excusa en esto de producir, tal vez un proyecto de programación, de computación, de radio, de música, de arte, de guiones, donde entren en diálogo con algunos de estos contenidos de ciencias que casi como disimuladamente, digamos, en realidad estén aprendiendo eso, pero que la entrada tenga que ver con algunas cuestiones que sean de interés de los jóvenes, que bueno, es cierto que muchas veces no es muy difícil, pero bueno, es un poco la que nos toca a los educadores, la complejidad.
The researchers are telling that the context are important. In which context we met science topics, and typically the context related to human being, what human being is doing, what is happening, those contexts are equally engaging for boys and girls and more engaging than science without the context. So combining things is important, I agree. I will come back to that. But anyway, so we measure engagement with the phones, asking those questions, and then we were looking, so this is what is happening. Students are doing the project-based learning, and sometimes they get a beep and they are answering those questions. It happens very quick. It takes 15 seconds to answer for young people. They are very skilled in use of mobile phones. And the engagement is not common first. So in random situations, about 8% of the situations are engaging for students. So 100 students, 100, altogether 200 students. And there is variation between the classes. In some classes, students are more engaged than in other classes. So somehow the class, the background of the students, but also the teacher would have an influence how engaging the situations are. So there are always variants that we should remember. The educational science is not so simple that this is making change to that. No, the variations are huge. Second, so we were asking that how engaging are those scientific practices. So the students were reporting what they are doing and then reporting how engaging it is. So asking questions and planning. And here we have the project-based learning class, it's a blue, and the control is green. So we can see that in general, in both classrooms, while students are planning, making argumentation, they are more engaging than in the situations in general. And especially in a project-based learning class, the asking questions and developing model and planning, they are engaging. So in some level also the doing, but it's not so engaging as planning and asking. The asking question is quite interesting, and also the making the model and planning. So they are one way to engage students, to increase their scientific practices in the lesson. And one paper we published in this Journal of Science Teacher Education, we were measuring the same teachers' classes in 2-year period, and teachers make a big jump between the years. So they become more familiar with the project-based learning, and they were more able to guide their students in those practices. And there's a very positive effect to the race in the level of engagement. And then of course, it's not enough that students enjoy in the classroom. They are doing things together and having fun. So it's also important to know what they learn. And that's why we were following the quasi-experimentation. We were measuring in the beginning with a kind of pre-test the level of knowledge and skills and competencies in the field of Newtonian mechanics, and then we have the post-test. And then this kind of conceptual knowledge. So of course the core ideas and practices are together, you are not able to separate them. But this question, it's quite clear that this question is more measuring the understanding of the force. It's more conceptually oriented question than practices oriented question. So this 2/3 of the questions were this kind of multiple choice question and 1/3 were open questions. And this question was asking that what are the forces acting on the ball after the kicking? So there is this gravity and air resistance, F and G are right. And only the direction is now asked. So the force of the kicking is not existing, that is Newtonian, not Newtonian mechanics. And another type of test item is measuring more the scientific practices. So we are now coming in Finland to the winter and there is one hobby activity of young people is going with the sledge downhill. And then we were asking students to pose questions, 2 questions that are guiding you to make investigation, looking for correlation between variables. For example, the question, how long is the downhill going? It's not a question that is guiding you to make research, but how the velocity depends on the mass. That is the question you can make investigation. So these 2 types of questions, more focusing to the conceptual knowledge and more focusing to this procedural knowledge or scientific practices. And then we recognize that in the case of conceptual knowledge, both groups performed quite well in the same way, according to pre-test, post-test measurement. They learn the conceptual knowledge similar way, in a traditional way or project-based learning way. But the procedural knowledge, only the group that was following the project-based learning, they learn better those procedural issues and the scientific practice issues. And actually this type of questions are very much in the PISA investigation. More than half of the questions are measuring this type of asking questions and planning and making evidence-based conclusions. And in Finland we were discussing with Juan Carlos about the final examination, if you are teaching according to the project-based learning, how the final examination is taking that into account. So in Finland, this project-based learning is very much according to the curriculum, and the final examination should be according to the curriculum. So nowadays in the final examination in high school, there are a lot of questions where students have to work with the data, make models, explain situations. So very much what is emphasized in project-based learning. So we have changed the national assessment also according to the curriculum. The project-based learning is not mentioned in the curriculum, but it's one way to orient with students according to the curriculum. So you can read more from the papers, but in a nutshell, the project-based learning would engage students in learning and support students science learning, and a lot of time is needed for prepared teachers to follow the project-based learning. And this interest issue that you raised, I have a couple of slides here, but we don't have time. But maybe you can later on come back. And I have here some this kind of data we collect from Finland. We ask students how interesting is a topic, And then we place the topic to the different context, to the different situation. For example, the movement in different situations. Movement of the human being, just movement without any context, and that kind of things. And then it was easy to see that the ideal context, so just physics, just chemistry, there are a lot of female, lot of male students who are not at all interested about ideal context. The scale is from 1 to 4, and there were many questions in the same context. So it takes too much time to explain in detail, but I think you get the figure that ideal context is very problematic, that there is especially female who are not interested at all. And the society, the distributions comes closer, and it comes more engaging for students. And then if you take the technology context, it is dividing even more than without context. But it is engaging for males and not engaging for females. On the other hand, you should recognize that we are not able to generalize that all females, all males, there are always those distributions. And we can say, okay, the average is here, and in both sides are students. But how much the distribution is on the right or left-hand side, that we can see. And what is interesting that always you are somehow related the issues to the human being context. They come quite equally interesting for both. So that was a little bit. My final issue, we have 3 minutes time. So in our teacher education, of course we are focusing to project-based learning, and this is now a little bit jump to more general. How to guide our student teachers to plan lessons, coherent lessons. I start with the coherence, and then I give an example that project-based learning is one way how to make science teaching and learning more coherent. And now I come back to the general issue. The Australian researchers, Lohan, Muller and Berry, they have developed this kind of content representation tool with these 8 questions, which are guiding teachers who are starting the career to plan lessons. And they have designed these questions according to this coherent science education. So, always you are planning a lesson, you should think of those 8 questions. So, what you want students to learn, what are the core ideas, that should be clear. Why it is important, meaningful and relevant, need to know. What else you know, so you are not teaching everything you know, you are teaching something that is relevant for those. What do you know about students' everyday experiences in the field you are teaching? What do you know about the conceptions? How context influences the topic? And what teaching methods and what assessment methods you are using. So this is very useful tool, and now we are, just this autumn, we are collecting data from our student teachers, how successful they are able to use this lesson design tool, and interviewing them and looking how it is making progress. This is also part of this international project I mentioned in the beginning. And this is actually something, even it is from Australia, I claim that in Finland we have always, in our didactical, we call it didactical thinking, we have very much thought about these issues. If I take the Finnish textbook here, on the left-hand side there is a textbook, and right-hand side there is a teacher manual. So we are usually publishing the textbook and teacher manual, and you can easily find in the teacher manual there is a very clear guidelines. What do you want students to learn? The first question. What are the core ideas? Why it is important? So both issues, if you take textbook and manual, then you can find those questions. What are students' conceptions? Typically in Finnish teacher manuals, there are the list of typical students' misconceptions. and what are students' everyday experiences. In the textbooks there are pictures about that. And context, teaching methods, and assessment methods. But I think that this might be useful tool for you also to think and try with your student teachers, and if it is helping students, your students, to make science education more coherent. So that was all I was planning to say today, and I close with this picture. So today in this lesson we have been discussing about coherent science instruction, and project-based learning was one example, very much following those four ideas. So thank you for your participation, and we will meet again today.
Excellent. ¿Quieres preguntar? Sí.
Yes, later on, I would like to know some more about the final exams you take in Finland. If you can expand on that later. Just
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah. Of course. Actually, we were discussing with Juan Carlos that we are not having any topics related to the assessment. But yes, final examination is important. I'm very much working with the final examination, also working as a chair of the examination board. So I have a lot of power in Finland to guide to what direction we are going with the final examination. And what we are now making, we are increasing the data, and we are increasing the different kind of materials, and the test is now totally computer-based. So students can use computers and calculate and use those same tools that they are using in the lesson. But maybe we have to plan other maybe Zoom meeting or something like that.
Okay.
We can organize
Yeah, we
that,
can
definitely.
organize Zoom,
Yeah.
But a good question, how to develop the state level examination?
Yeah.
How it support the activities at school?
And I think it's for us quite relevant to know how this committee, you are the chair and you are a science teacher in a way, but how are selected the participants, and what kind of disciplines are they representing in terms of building up the evaluation. But I think we can, you gave a good point, we can organize a Zoom meeting just to discuss, and because that's very relevant. We are not aware of how actually this final examination habilitates or enable students to continue in the university. What happened with the students that go through the polytechnics track, how does it work, and that would take time to be explained. So we can arrange a video call or a Zoom meeting. Thank you, Yari, very much.
So we have 1 hour break.
1 hour break. You can sleep if you wish. Or you can come with us. We are going to show Plaza de Mayo, this area, because
Great to see you again. And this second lecture today, it's actually not a lecture, it's very much based on you, what's happening. So we are following the one cooperative learning approach called IGSAW. How many of you have earlier heard about IGSAW method as a teaching learning method?
Not me.
You have learned. Okay. But anyway, if you know earlier, it's fine. But if you are not familiar, you become familiar. And this is also an example how I am organizing my own science education class. So sometimes I use this very student-centered activity and giving just a short introduction to the topic. And then at the end of the lesson, we summarize what we have learned. This material, I think that you were given the link and you have the learning material. Originally it was done in Finnish and then I translated to English because we have also English-speaking students. And then I was maybe 3 years ago, I was in Arequipa and I was asked to talk about this type of topic and then not me, but one local person in Peru translated to the Spanish. So I'm not familiar how good translation it is, but I'm sure that you get sense of the ideas. It has not been checked, it's just a quick translation. So then, some characteristics of the cooperative learning. So when we are organizing learning according to this kind of ideology, then we are having two types of aims in our class. First, of course, we are aiming to guide students to learn academic skills and knowledge. But at the same time, we are aiming to support students to learn collaboration skills. Typically, there are two types of aims, academic aims and collaboration aims. So I'm not now emphasizing so much those collaboration working skills, but they are hidden in this activity, and you learn something about that. And my work, actually, a lot of my work is done before. I prepare this learning material and plan the schedule, and now it's fully up to you what you learn. And the slogan, one for all for one, this is coming also from the ideology behind the cooperative learning. So the group, we are working in a small group of 3 persons. The success of the group depends on every individual in the group. In a similar way as project-based learning, in this cooperative learning, there are certain characteristics which make the difference between the traditional group work and cooperative group work. In a traditional group work, it could happen very often that there are some students who are not doing anything, just sitting and doing something else. But in cooperative learning, in a small group, everybody has to invest time and resources and support each other. There is kind of positive independence and also the accountability inside the group. So positive independence and accountability, a lot of face-to-face interaction, and you learn also those group skills and interpersonal skills and the group process. These are the characteristics of the cooperative learning. And now we become familiar with teaching and learning science through reading and writing. That is the academic topics. I have just to explain you how we work. We are having 2 types of groups. The other group is called home group. And first we go to the home group. So you have to go to 3-person home group. And you have to give letters inside the group. One is A, one is B, one is C. And then you are given the material. Everybody has the same material. And then we go to the expert group. I have a better pictures how to do it. And in the expert group, we are focusing to the certain view of learning through reading and writing. Group number 1 is focusing to the, I have to check, learning through reading. Person number 2, group number 2, learning through writing, and group number 3, different kind of activities that are focusing to the reading and writing. So after working half an hour in those expert group, you go back to the home group. And in the home group, there are people who are able to teach the topic to the other members of the home group. There is something wrong, but let's take the pictures, they make it clear. So the topics are learning through reading, learning through writing, and learning through activities. But I'm willing to make it more challenging. In addition that you learn those techniques, you have to focus now also to the learning and engagement. You have to recognize how a certain type of activity is supportive for learning, why it is good for learning, and why it is good for engagement. So these are kind of extra challenge to your group work. And that's why you have to summarize and give some examples which are especially good for supporting learning and which are good for supporting interest and motivation and engagement. So we start with this home group, A, B, and C home groups. And you just work for a while, maybe 7 minutes, so to 5:20 or maybe 5:15 is enough. And you decide who is number 1, who is number 2, who is number 3 in your home group. And you somehow also take a look for the material and little bit outline what are your group goals and group aims, what you are now willing to learn. Of course, I'm telling that you have to learn those techniques and also why they are supportive for learning and engagement. And then, after deciding who is number 1, who is number 2, who is number 3, you go to the expert group. And group number 1 is focusing to the reading, to writing, and third activities. And let's about 6:10 we come back to the home groups. Like this. And then in home groups you are teaching the topic to others. So this is the meaning of accountability, that you are responsible for teaching the topic you have been learning in expert group to the others in your home. And then you have to make the summarize together why this method is good for learning, why it is good for engagement. So let's make it slowly. So we start with this home group, and the home group is kind of decision who is 1, who is 2, who is 3, and kind of common goal setting. And about 5:15 we go to those expert groups. Any questions about this first phase? It is not very hard work. It's just deciding who is 1, 2, who is 3, and then some general discussion about the aims for learning. Okay, now you have to go to the 3-person group. You have to have 1 more in your group. You have to have 1 more in your group. So you have to, please, can you move here, maybe? And then you have to have 1 more. And then there is 1 person who can decide whatever you take. So now we are here. In home groups, you decide who is 1, who is 2, who is 3, and some general discussion about the aims. Okay, clear?
So, what are we going to learn?
We are Now it is 5:15, and now we have to go to those expert groups. So now it is 5:15, and now we will go to those expert groups. So let's go to the next phase. We decide that this table is for number ones, and the second table is, or maybe the last table, for number two, and here is number three. So 1, 2, 3. So you go to the expert groups now, and you stay because you are three.
I'm 3. So, are we going to read together
Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah.
chapter 3, section 3?
Yeah. Just a minute.
Okay. Number 3.
Number threes are here. 1, 2, and 3.
¿Cómo te va?
No, y ahora leemos.
Voy a clicar. Dale. Yo voy a explicar.
So, okay, now we have number one. One is there, and you are focusing to the reading, you are focusing to the writing, and you are focusing to the activities. And what we are doing now, I just repeat a little bit. So now you are all focusing to same topic. So maybe you can decide that everybody individually go the text somehow through, and then you discuss what is the most important to teach to others when you go back to your home.
Okay.
And same for you. Maybe you individually first look for the text, and because the schedule is that we have to become back to the home groups at 6 o'clock. So we have 45 minutes. So maybe maximum is 15 minutes for individual reading. And then you have to summarize what is important, and also discuss about how this type of activities are supportive for learning and how they are supportive for engagement in order to teach to others in your home group. And we have a break here inside.
Yes,
So what time? So you are working, but you can take coffee.
yes, or we can bring coffee inside
Yeah.
if you want.
Yeah.
And yes, we can do that way.
And it's important that when 6 o'clock we go back to the home groups, you are ready. This is the accountability. You are ready for teaching others the topic. Any questions now? Until 6 you are working in this course. Good.
Okay.
O sea, leemos y nos ponemos en común. Ponemos
Ustedes, perdón, ¿terminaron? Sí. Ah, sí,
Vuelvan a sus nidos, a sus juegos.
Miéntame a sus amigos.
Claro,
Okay.
Ir y vender.
No les voy a echar la culpa a ustedes.
Now we can go to the next phase. So we go back to the home groups. And in the home groups you are teaching what you have agreed in the expert group. And in addition, you make a summary how these methods are supportive for learning and engagement. So we do not need the whole time, maybe 6:20. So
¿Y cómo te fue, Sandra? ¿Vos sos de escribir? No, quiero decir que... Sos de escribir.
Perdón, te dije el vasito ahí, te voy a sacar.
Ah, sí.
Bueno, maestro.
Puedes cigarro.
Más y va más.
No, algo removedor.
Sí.
Gracias.
La sociedad también bueno,
Funcionaba.
decilo por vos.
Gracias, no voy al net.
Eso es el celular en mi computadora.
Summary about the learning and engagement also. Summarizing, yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, you're the one.
No,
No, she's the one.
She's the one, she's the one.
Yes, you. Vos hablas.
Vos hablás.
Vos hablas. Obviamente que vos hablas. Sí, sí.
Vale.
Le pones el micrófono y hablas. No te hagas largo. No.
So it looks that we are very effective and we can go to the next step. So we can go now to the next step. Now you have been introducing those 3 topics in your home groups, and you learn the kind of highlights related to the learning science through reading, learning science through writing, and learning science through activities. And you have also made a summary how they support learning and engagement. So now I'm willing to listen to what you have find. So some highlights, maybe we start with the reading. So would you like to raise something and especially raise the issue that how it support learning, this kind of activity you have introduced to others, and how it support engagement. So I'm very willing to learn. So who will start? So we can decide that one group, maybe you start with the reading and then the next about writing and then the last about activities. So what is your consensus understanding now?
No.
You are the most expert.
Yes. Oh. Hi.
Habla castellano.
But
Habla castellano.
she's going to start with reading,
Okay.
with
Reading.
relative. Lo tuyo era
Reading.
reading. Right.
Reading.
Dale, tranquila con micrófono, ellos van traduciendo.
Lectura.
Bien, nosotros en el grupo que estuvimos trabajando sobre lectura, lo que vimos era, bueno, primero ciertas estrategias que tenían que ver básicamente con el desarrollo de habilidades metacognitivas, es decir, que el estudiante no solamente pueda hacer uso de los textos y leer, sino que además pueda ser consciente del proceso que involucra, ¿sí? O el proceso en el que está involucrado. Que ese proceso de lectura tiene que ver con una actividad hermenéutica donde los conocimientos previos se ven modificados a partir de una primera lectura y que como resultado de eso tenemos como un conocimiento de fondo modificado a partir de las nuevas relaciones que se pueden establecer. Que esa lectura es un proceso activo, ¿sí? En el que el estudiante va retroalimentándose de cada lectura que hace del material. Y después había varias estrategias que tenían que ver con ayudar a que fuera un proceso de lectura efectiva. Por ejemplo, ciertos tópicos para preparar la lectura, ¿no? Cierto tipo de preguntas que le den una idea al estudiante de hacia dónde va el contenido del texto que tiene que leer y que le permitan leerlo con cierta intencionalidad, ¿no? Y por lo menos que tenga el interés de encontrar ciertas respuestas a medida que vaya leyendo el texto. Lo otro que nos pareció, o que está mencionado ahí, que nos parece importante y que todos los que somos más grandes enseguida lo hicimos, fue agarrar una hoja y tomar notas, ¿no? A partir de la lectura ir tomando notas, armar un mapa conceptual o un mapa mental o simplemente hacer un resumen o anotar ciertas palabras que nos permitan ir organizando el contenido de la lectura. Bueno, el otro punto que aparecía como estrategia es esto de ir relacionando el contenido nuevo que vamos teniendo en el texto o en la lectura que estamos haciendo con los contenidos previos, ¿no? Y poder empezar a linkear y relacionar qué ya sabemos sobre ese tema con lo que va apareciendo y por ahí encontrar algunas cuestiones que no coincidan, ¿sí? Preguntas que no surjan a partir de, bueno,
yo pensaba que las cosas eran así y el texto lo planteó de otra manera, o incoherencias también que se pueden dar dentro del mismo texto que van a marcar cuánto se va comprendiendo del texto, de la lectura que se está haciendo. Hablaba de una tarjeta de lectura como ayuda, eso me parece que es interesante, con ciertas pautas que le permitan al estudiante organizar y saber, bueno, qué ir haciendo durante el proceso de lectura. Hablaba también del texto como marco, y eso tenía que ver con, bueno, a partir de la lectura armar ese mapa conceptual que nos permita establecer relaciones entre los conceptos fundamentales, o usar un marco proveniente del texto que tenía que ver con usar la información que aparece en el texto que se lee y a partir de eso, por ejemplo, armar un cuadro comparativo, ¿sí? que nos permita con esa información llegar a una habilidad de orden superior en el sentido que no solamente entiendo lo que dice el texto, sino que además puedo hacer otras cosas como comparar, ¿sí? y establecer relaciones entre los contenidos de la lectura. Plantea también la cuestión de la lectura recíproca, que los estudiantes proponerles lecturas de a pares, de manera que lean un texto y que después entre ellos se comenten lo que leyeron, que hagan un resumen y que se pasen los resúmenes uno a otro y puedan charlar de qué entendió cada uno sobre la lectura que hicieron, y después, bueno, la lectura también y el diálogo con el resto de las clases y el docente. Ya está ahí.
Oh. Great.
Thank you.
So it was a very deep analysis of the learning, but did you discuss about the engagement? How those activities are supportive for student engagement? So maybe we can give the floor to the next group, but that was so well done in the field of learning. So would you like now to add something about the engagement? And if you first would like to add something about the learning, of course you can do that, but then focus more to the engagement. Who is doing? So maybe the writing person. Sorry, you have to come here.
No.
Solo por acá.
Bueno, no sé, a mi grupo le tocó trabajar con la escritura y vinculándolo con la lectura, por lo que ahora escuchamos y también escuchamos en la charla en grupo, vemos que quizás todo lo que tiene que ver con la representación metacognitiva también aparece, y vinculamos también un recorrido respecto de qué provoca el interés en los estudiantes en relación con estos procesos, ¿no? Por un lado, la posibilidad de correr las actividades...
What makes engagement? Can you repeat?
¿Repetir?
Ok. La posibilidad de generar actividades que se corran, por ejemplo, de la posibilidad de estar evaluadas todo el tiempo, y que en lugar de ser propuestas de escritura que se usen para evaluar, sean propuestas que descontracturen la evaluación y que sea una posibilidad de pensarse a la hora de escribir como algo atractivo desde otros lugares. En ese sentido, también encontramos que se estimula el interés a partir de compartir con otros estos procesos y poder interactuar en esa construcción, mientras quizás lo que uno produce provoca el interés y alienta a lo que el otro puede producir o intercambiar respecto de los intereses diferentes y diversos que aparecen en un aula heterogénea. Respecto del interés, también la posibilidad de retroalimentar y que esa mirada de los pares y del docente y de la propia mirada a través de todo ese proceso, el ir y venir sobre el texto al escribir, hace que haya una posibilidad de pensarlo todo el tiempo, como un ciclo, ¿no? inicia acá, a partir de estas ideas, las repienso, surgen nuevas preguntas, tengo un esquema para escribirlo, pero al mismo tiempo también me estimula lo que veo, lo que escucho, lo que intercambio y vuelvo sobre esa producción enriqueciéndola a partir de lo que me genera todo ese intercambio. Lo que nos pareció muy interesante del proceso también es la posibilidad de pensarlo a partir de generar instancias de profunda concentración, el trabajo del solitario para poder escribir desde el corrernos de los distractores que naturalmente existen cuando pensamos, no sé, pensando con otros o intercambiando, primero hacer un proceso individual donde yo puedo pensar, donde puedo dedicarme a entender, a armar un esquema mental de lo que quiero escribir y que eso actúe de alguna manera como una suerte de organizador sobre el que me puedo apoyar para después desarrollar e ir construyendo el texto en función de un borrador. Y creemos también que eso contribuye a perder el miedo a un proceso tan complejo como es la escritura. Quizás el poder sentir que es un proceso en el que todo el tiempo puedo volver a revisar y puedo ver y puedo intercambiar y puedo volver a pensar y surgen preguntas que me llevan por otro camino y eso lo puedo transformar, ayuda a que haya una producción más libre y más potente que potencie la curiosidad, el deseo de explorar otros recorridos que a veces las estructuras rígidas nos hacen perder.
Okay, good. Excellent. And now the final, the activity. So maybe you can contribute to the discussion, so something to add with the learning, and something to add with the engagement based on your learning related to the activities. You have to come here.
Well, I guess it is my turn on the chair. Well, this bit, I am the expert on the third bit, and we discussed that it takes advantage of both parts discussed previously. So we quite agree on what's written there. And we've seen what we read and we discussed that we can split the process in two steps generally, because we were discussing about reading and producing some material. In the context of scientific teaching, that goes quite beyond the written word, actually, because you may regard reading as doing research, so that's documenting your knowledge. It implies finding material to generate some knowledge that might even go beyond what's written in words. For instance, there are mentioned some blogs, and doing blogs you might end up doing research on photographic archives, so you would illustrate that, must be engaging. In order to produce an engaging blog. And on the second bit, it would be called writing, but I would rather consider it as production, because you produce something, usually written, to synthesize that knowledge you've gained in the previous step. And that might be a blog, that might be a report, that might be a manual, that might be an interview. In all those bits, there are engaging parts. For example, when the blog I mentioned, you had to go through a photographic archive to illustrate some topic, so it must have some meaning. And constraints are engaging. For example, if you write a manual, you would have to consider who's reading that manual, who's the audience, who's the intended audience. If you're producing a blog, of course, you have to take into account the audience. If you do an interview, you may have to check some background on the person you're interviewing, so that needs to have some research before. And that research is paramount to making meaningful questions to a subject. Or even a flyer. A flyer is particularly interesting because you have to synthesize concepts. And for example, you would have to synthesize things so that it avoids copying and pasting. So that's why it becomes a very, very engaging constraint. I don't know if there are any other views about it, but that's what we made sense of.
Thanks. So excellent. It was quite challenging to follow and write at the same time, but here are my notes. So let's have a look at my notes. So somehow I think we recognize that this reading and writing and those activities from the pedagogical point of view, they have a lot of common. So that's why I a little bit summarize from there and there. So that was coming out. Your comments, but I was not able to write everything. I just pick up something. So you emphasize in both in reading and writing the learning of metacognitive skills. So from the point of view of learning, it's so important that we focus also to those skills. How you guide your learning processes, and teacher is emphasizing both sides, the learning of the topics, but also the learning of the metacognitive skills, self-regulation skills, and that kind of things. Very simple, preventing copying and pasting. So, of course, it's not learning if you are copying and pasting, so it's very simple. So you have to guide students to process. Maybe this belongs to this active process. Previous knowledge activation, that was very clear. Outlining the writing, take a look for the whole web page, reading the titles, somehow activating at the same time your previous knowledge and experiences. That comes very clear. Then you were emphasizing this process, how through different kind of small activities you are supporting yourself in knowledge construction. And then all in all, the active process, starting from the planning and doing and getting feedback and evaluating that what you are doing. And that was interesting, splitting the process to two steps. If I understand it correctly, so reading is like doing research, and then documenting at the same time, and writing is somehow synthesizing, blogs, flyer, and nowadays the infographs, they are quite interesting to make an infograph. So very, you know what is infograph? They are used very much in policy and everywhere. So to do that kind of things. I was a little bit wondering, in the last phase, this contextualizing. So students are reading not to the teacher, they are not writing to the teacher, they are writing to somebody else, to the audience. Contextualizing this kind of learning. And what was not so much emphasized was the collaboration and interaction, so how it is influencing your reading. Reciprocal reading was mentioned at least. How well I succeeded? Would you like to add something? So is this all what you mentioned? So we are synthesizing now reading, writing activities, how they support students' learning. Anything to add?
But just a comment of what you have just said. The main audience is the teacher, is the one that is going to give the mark. So when we are writing in a university or in a school environment, we are thinking mainly in the one that is going to give the mark.
Should it be like this, or should we somehow rethinking the
It is
processes?
like that. In my introspection and what I have seen from others, it is like that.
Do everybody agree?
Unless it's a club that is extra curricular.
Do everybody agree?
Yes.
That students are basically still writing to the teacher?
Yes.
We have two. Well, the
Yes.
majority.
But what about the feeling? If they have a different, sorry. If we can create a feeling that there is a real audience we are writing, of course it's coming to the teacher. Do you think that it's still having an impact to the learning?
Yeah, yes. By all means.
Anything to add? Thank you for this.
You're welcome.
So,
Myself, we were chatting about this. For me, the construction of a cognitive map, that it is a mixture of everything. Everything goes there. And it's done with the hand. I mean, we are sort of writing and drawing. For me, it's fundamental.
yeah. Anything to add to this learning part? Okay, and what I was able to pick up from the engagement, somebody was emphasizing this, or actually I was interpreting, it was not mentioned like this, but if the students have at least a certain amount of feeling of autonomy, that is one way how to motivate. Because there are three basic fundamental psychological needs for human being, and one is need for autonomy. So writing without continuous pressing from the teacher side. What are the other? This autonomy is one. What are the other basic psychological needs we all need as a human being? Competence. We all are looking for competence, and how you can support the feeling of competence while reading and writing. There were many examples that other students are giving feedback, and let's hope that, and we can train the students that they are giving constructive feedback, supporting the feeling of competence. And as a teacher, of course, you have to pick the success, supporting the feeling of competence. And what is the third one? It was not mentioned in my understanding. Maybe it was mentioned, but I didn't recognize. So it is the kind of relatedness. You have to have a feeling that I need others and others need me. We are doing things together. So the feeling or need to be a group member. So these are the three basic psychological needs. Need for autonomy, need for competence, and need for relatedness. And in those materials, they were very much emphasized those three issues. And they were related to this engagement. So that quite many examples was giving that something is interesting, something create interest. Blogs and attractive text, they can create interest. So the way how to support the development of interest, it's a content-based, knowledge-based, and activity-based. Here, in the last one, there is the relatedness, feeling that we need each other's change of opinions. Would you like to add something about how these methods are supportive for engagement, interest and motivation? Anything to add to my list? Yeah, please.
I feel that the third point, the activities, the activity, it's the one that provides more creativity to the students, because they are not constrained to what it has been already written. and there they can do their own interviews or tests. They can go outside and do their own thing. I feel that is very attractive, and that activity can be also a laboratory research. It could be many things, field or laboratory research.
Good. So in my country, this when they go to the industry site visits and visits to the research laboratories or that kind of places, they typically interview the staff members in order to know what science-oriented people are doing in that kind of places. What is the education behind, what they are really doing, what they are doing together, and that kind of. The interviews are the way how to learn about the professions and careers. Maybe one I would like to add is, okay, the contextuality. So the students would have the feeling that this is something real we are doing, blog to the audience again. So that is also supportive. The context are important from the point of view of engagement and interest. But anything to add? Yeah, please.
Do the Finnish students have enough freedom to have an opinion that perhaps is not the one the professor has? I mean, even in science, for example, in climate change, environmental issues, and stuff like that, can they write something that maybe the professor is not in total agreement, and that is okay with the professor?
So the values are important in our education. If you are very much against the common values, for example, racism, or then it's not accepted at all. But the environmental issues, it's a value in our education. The sustainability and sustainable lifestyle and climate issues. If you are against and provocatively behave, I think that it's not accepted, because it's a common value in our society, in our school. And the curriculum, the values are described very well, and then everything is somehow reflecting the values. So, and we discussed in previous session this matriculation examination. If somebody is there writing very much against the common values, it could reject it then. So we do not accept that kind of things. But of course, you can have opinions, you can argue in an acceptable way. So it's very difficult now to go into the details, but yes, we do not accept that kind of things. Are we happy now? I'm not going to detail, but if you are willing to look what I have been thinking myself, you can find answers and examples from my slides. They are in the system. And for example, I have somehow summarized how they support learning, and there are also summarizes how they support interest and pictures and that kind of things. But we were almost discussing about them all. This is my summary of the all. And then if you are willing to learn more about these reading and writing activities, I have here many examples. Okay, hold on. You can, if you are willing, you can use as your learning material, and if you like to translate, it's up to you. But they are summarizing those things, and you can use them as you like. So I think that we are now coming to the end today. Is there still something that you would like to add? For example, how you feel about this cooperative learning? But please, whatever.
Una pregunta que surgió en los... Una pregunta que surgió mientras estábamos en los grupos, tanto cuando estábamos todos los unos juntos como cuando volvimos al lugar de origen, tiene que ver con se me fue la palabra. Lo que influye la escritura manuscrita en la comprensión tanto de los textos como después de poder generar textos escritos. Es decir, nos pasaba, lo que nos estábamos charlando era esto de, nosotros asociamos fuertemente la escritura manuscrita a la generación de ideas, a la organización de ideas mentalmente para poder después traducirlas en el papel. Y vemos que las nuevas generaciones están vinculadas a las cuestiones tecnológicas, que leen desde la computadora o leen desde el celular o escriben de la computadora en el celular, han perdido esa capacidad de organizar esas ideas y eso se refleja en una dificultad a la hora de la oralidad y de la escritura. ¿Está de acuerdo? ¿Le parece que sí? ¿Cómo solucionamos eso?
So thank you. But first, you should understand that I'm not an expert in reading and writing. I'm a science education person. And I think you almost answered to that question. But I have a kind of common sense understanding, not deep understanding. And this outlining is important, not just starting to write or just copying. You should first outline and get feedback for your first outline and then make process in writing. So, and I'm sure if somebody else is more familiar with what is the connection between writing and learning, so is there somebody who is familiar with that, linguistic person? I typically organize this activity with the language teachers and language student teachers and science student teachers, so they can learn from each other about this kind of topics. They are better than me, the language people. But if somebody is familiar...
No, the only thing I'm not familiar, but what I would add is that when students are working in building up conceptual maps, for instance, they are writing, and if they are doing that in a collaborative way, it's huge, the engagement and the way they go forward in understanding, in building some conceptual tools to understand whatever. That's something that I could see in my teaching when I teach theory of education, for instance.
Great, thank you. What about this Jigsaw method? One example of the cooperative learning. Do you think that it could be usable for your class here? So it's not necessarily that teacher is teaching in a traditional way everything. We have to trust our students and push them according to these schedules to teach to each other. And actually, I know, you know that when you are teaching something, then you learn yourself a lot.
Oh, yeah.
That's an old slogan. So that's the best way to learn, when you teach. Anything to add? So then I'm very happy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being so active and constructing the new knowledge together. So let's meet tomorrow.
Thank you, Yari. Ok, pueden correr ahora, pueden irse.